In August 1989, a shocking incident occurred in Kazanet, a remote area of Siberia. As a freight train was traveling on its usual route, the train driver suddenly spotted strange objects lying across the tracks. Despite attempting an emergency brake, the train couldn't stop in time and ran over the bodies. Upon inspecting the scene, the police were horrified to find 7 bodies scattered along the tracks, all of them teenagers around the age of 15. The victims were quickly identified as a group of close friends living in the same area. Their deaths immediately sent shockwaves through the local community. No one understood why a group of teenagers would be on the train tracks at such a dangerous time. Theories began to emerge, ranging from a tragic accident and reckless behavior to suspicions of a serious crime involving drugs or school violence. The police conducted a thorough investigation, but found no clear evidence to explain the cause of death. There were no obvious signs of a struggle or fight at the scene. Ultimately, the case was ruled an accident, but a haunting feeling lingered over the entire community, leaving behind a huge question mark about what really happened on that fateful night. After the discovery of the 7 teenagers' bodies hit by a train in Kazanet, Siberia, in August 1989, authorities quickly launched an investigation. In a short time, they announced their initial conclusion. It was a tragic accident. According to the police theory, the group of teenagers might have been playing or walking along the tracks, then grew tired and laid down to rest, accidentally falling asleep right on the railway line. They were struck by the freight train while in a deep sleep and had no time to react. However, this conclusion was quickly met with strong opposition from the victims' families. Many relatives argued that the theory was illogical, pointing to details of the scene that raised their suspicions. Most notably, all the teenagers' backpacks were found some distance from the scene, neatly arranged in a row. This contradicted the assumption that the teens were so exhausted they had accidentally fallen asleep. No one would carefully line up their backpacks like that and then lie down to sleep in the middle of the tracks, one parent stated angrily. Furthermore, the families also stated that their children were healthy, alert, and aware of danger. They insisted that the idea of 7 teenagers simultaneously falling asleep on the tracks was highly improbable, especially at night in the cold Siberian weather. The contradiction between the official investigation's conclusion and the unusual details at the scene ignited a wave of suspicion among the public. Many began to believe that the incident might not have been a simple accident, but rather concealed a darker, hidden truth. Refusing to accept the police's hasty conclusion that the deaths of the 7 teenagers in Kazanet were a mere accident, the victims' families embarked on an arduous journey to find the truth. For 2 long years, they continuously filed complaints, demanded to review the investigation files, held press conferences, and appealed for media attention. These fathers and mothers refused to let their children pass away in silence, labeled with such a questionable cause of death. The turning point in this tireless effort came when they decided to write a letter directly to the then Russian President, Boris Yeltsin. In the letter, they detailed the inconsistencies in the investigation's findings, from the neatly arranged backpacks to the lack of transparency in the scene analysis. They pleaded with the president to intervene to find justice for their children. Unexpectedly, this bold action brought hope. In 1991, facing increasing pressure from the public and the media, the authorities officially decided to reopen the investigation. A new team of investigators was assigned, this time with a commitment to approach the case more objectively and comprehensively. The decision to reopen the case was like a glimmer of light in the darkness, bringing hope to the families who were exhausted by grief and injustice. Though it was still uncertain whether the truth would be exposed, their perseverance had at least forced the legal system to listen and act. It was a first victory in their journey to find justice. After the case was reopened in 1991, the new team of investigators approached the incident with a completely different perspective. They decided to exhume the bodies to re-examine the cause of death of the 7 teenagers. What was discovered from the forensic examinations sent shockwaves through the public. The victims had not died from a train accident as initially concluded. Instead, the autopsy results showed that the boys had been brutally assaulted before being placed on the tracks. Their bodies bore multiple severe injuries from blunt force trauma, clear signs of a deliberate attack. This proved that they had been killed before the train passed through the scene. From that point, The case was officially reclassified as a murder staged to look like an accident. Someone had intentionally arranged the victims' bodies on the tracks to conceal their crime, leading everyone to believe it was just a tragic incident. The earlier unusual details, like the neatly arranged backpacks, now became even more suspicious. The revelation of the truth not only completely overturned the nature of the case, but also proved that the unwavering determination and relentless efforts of the victims' families were entirely justified. After the case was reinvestigated and identified as a premeditated murder, investigators began to widen their scope of questioning and screen potential suspects in the local area. Eventually, under pressure of evidence and prolonged interrogations, a group of local men suddenly confessed to the shocking truth. In their confession, they stated that on the night of the incident, the group had been drinking near the railway area. When they encountered the group of teenagers passing by, an argument broke out. In a drunken and angry state, these men brutally attacked the boys. Not stopping there, they carried out their crime to the end, resulting in the deaths of all 7 teenagers. Even more horrifying was that the person who orchestrated the entire criminal act was a local police lieutenant named Nikolai. According to the group's testimony, it was Nikolai who ordered them to kill all the victims to eliminate witnesses, fearing that his and the group's identities would be exposed. After murdering the boys, Nikolai and his accomplices staged a scene to make it look like an accident caused by falling asleep on the tracks. The fact that a police officer, someone who was supposed to uphold justice, was a mastermind of the massacre plunged the entire community into a state of horror and outrage. The case not only exposed a heinous crime, but also raised many doubts about the level of corruption and moral decay within the local law enforcement system at the time. It was a massive shock and a wake-up call for the entire society. After the case was reinvestigated and the perpetrators confessed to their heinous acts, the culprits, including Police Lieutenant Nikolai, were brought to trial in the first court session. The forensic evidence, detailed confessions, and corroborating witness testimonies left the court with no doubt about the brutality of the crime. At the end of the trial, the defendants were sentenced to death, a verdict considered appropriate for the shocking crime they had committed against 7 innocent teenagers. However, the hope for justice quickly faded as Russia entered a period of major political and legal transformation. In the early 1990s, under pressure from the international community and human rights organizations, the Russian government began judicial reforms, which included a review of the death penalty. One of the most controversial decisions was the Russian Supreme Court's overturning of the previously issued death sentences for the defendants in the Kazanet case, citing changes in legal and humanitarian policy. As a result, the murderers, despite having been convicted, were set free. For the victims' families and the community, this was not just a betrayal of justice, but also a new wound cut deeply into a pain that had never healed. Many believed that the law had been bent by political hands, and that justice, once again, had been bitterly denied. The Kazanet case has since become not just a personal tragedy, but also a symbol of the powerlessness of the Russian justice system in the post-Soviet era. After the perpetrators of the Kazanet massacre were released due to the overturning of their death sentences, outrage and unease gripped the community. However, something even more terrifying happened in the following years. A series of key witnesses related to the case died one by one under mysterious circumstances. Some were said to have had accidents, while others disappeared without a trace. These successive deaths further fueled suspicions that an underground force was trying to silence those who knew the truth. Despite this, the victims' families did not give up. Though they endured years of pain and disappointment, they continued to persistently file petitions, seek media support, and call for international intervention. They fought not only for their children, but also for the belief that true justice could not be forgotten or traded for political interests. Their relentless efforts eventually paid off. In 2001, the case was reopened once more. This time, under public pressure and with the remaining evidence, the court convicted some of the main culprits. However, the disappointment was not over. Instead of the harsh sentences from before, the defendants received much lighter prison terms, ranging from 7 to 10 years. Although justice was served to some extent, for many, it was still an incomplete ending. The light sentences could not compensate for the immense loss of the 7 families. The Kazanet case became a symbol not only of a brutal crime, but also of a long journey filled with blood, tears, and resilience to reclaim justice. However belated, the Kazanet case is not merely a tragedy of 7 innocent teenagers, but also a profound symbol of the bitter failure of the justice system during a turbulent era. From the initial sloppy investigations, the overturned verdicts, to the perpetrators being set free and a series of witnesses dying mysteriously, every development in the case painted a grim picture of moral decay and corruption within law enforcement agencies. However, amidst that darkness, a light shone from the extraordinary perseverance of the victims' parents. They were not people of power or influence, yet they refused to let their children die in silence, refused to let the truth be hidden under guise of an accident. They wrote petitions, sent letters, and sought justice for over a decade, knowing the path ahead was fraught with obstacles and threats. It was this tireless spirit of struggle that forced society to look again, the media to speak up, and ultimately, the legal system to retry the case, however late. Though the outcome was not entirely as hoped, they proved that the truth, no matter how long it is buried, can eventually be unearthed. If there are still people willing to stand up and protect it. The legacy of the Kazanet case is a profound warning. Justice does not come on its own, and in the darkest of times, it is a courage and unconditional love of parents that becomes a guiding light for the truth to be revealed.